talk a little bit about join concepts. So relational databases, again, these are related tables. They are related tables that are developed based on normalization. Once we've normalized those tables, we're able to have our data sorted out in such a way that it's easy for us to query. So the way joins work is that we're going to update the from clause. Similar to our order of operations, the from clause is usually the first thing that runs. So at this point, we're going to make changes to the from clause so that we create virtual tables. When we join two tables, we're going to join them based on a common column per se. So think about sets. When you have sets of data, maybe you have a set of students in one school and a set of courses in another school. You go ahead and check which students are taking courses here, which students are not taking courses, and so on. So you create a virtual table based on those two tables that are matching. So if we understand sets, it should be easier. Cartesian product, again, just has to do with if you have 2 values in one table and 10 values in one table, the Cartesian product is going to be 20. So if you have 2 students and 10 different dishes, if you do a Cartesian product of the 2 sets, in that case, every student will have 10 dishes. So those 2 students will end up with 20 dishes of food. And that's necessarily not what we want when we are doing our joins. So we need to be able to have a foreign key that is related to a primary key. So let's check out a few examples. Again, joins, picture them as, let me make this bigger. Picture them as sets, right? As you look at this Venn diagram, an inner join, which you see right here, is an intersection of the two. So for instance, if you look at this query, you're selecting the first name and the amount from the order table. Here you're joining the sales. You give it an alias of the sales order as ORD. You're joining it on, or you're joining it with the employee table on a common column. The common column in this place is the employee ID. So whatever employee has placed an order is what we are going to see. If you have an employee that has not placed any order, they are not going to show up. If you have an order that was not placed by an employee, it's not also going to show up. It's only going to show you the matching records of both employee and order or sales order. Outer join is different. Outer join includes all the records in one table and then the matching records in the other table, depending on if it's left or right. Left or right joins are really interchangeable. It depends on how you write it. The name of the table that you write to the left or that you write first becomes the left table. The name of the table that you write on the right becomes the right table. So more or less, you would hardly see right joins, right outer joins out there. It's very, very less popular because most of the time we read from left to right. So if you're going to join employee table and order table and you want to use a right join, you might as well just flip the two of them. Flip the two tables and then use a left join. Sometimes, it's problematic for others to use it. A union is just, a full outer join is just a union. You're pulling everything together. So it doesn't really get used often as well. But there are some cases where you might need to just get all the data and look at it in one go. Okay. So the most popular is the left outer join. You also notice that the inner join is a default. So if you have a query that's written in this form with just join, that means you're talking of the inner join. Meanwhile, when you're talking of left outer join, right outer join, most of the time the outer word is omitted. So it just becomes a left join or a right join, just like the inner is omitted and it's just a regular join. Okay. So a quick example, left join, you have a from clause, the join clause, and then an alias for the table. That way, when you get to use it in a select clause, you can actually identify the columns with that table, and it's not too long. Because think about it, when you have to add the database name, the schema name, the table name, and then the column name, it's going to end up taking the whole line of code. So you want to use that alias so that it shortens your code and it looks a little bit succinct. The on clause is what you use to identify the matching columns. In some cases, you might have to join more than 2 tables. In other cases, you might have to even join more than 2 columns together, per se. Yes, so I was saying that we use aliases, as you can see here. When you go to the from clause, from HR employee as EMP, that's the alias that I'm going to use for EMP.firstname. And you can also have multiple joins, multiple on It's a composite join. For instance, if you have multiple columns that are identical or matching in both tables, it's rarely the case, but in some cases you might need it. So you might also have multiple joins. Maybe you take one table, join with another. Now you take that product and join it with another table, and so on and so forth. But remember, the order of the tables do not really matter in this case because it's an inner join. It's looking at the intersection. So remember also the column names. If I go in and enter name in here, it might ask you the name, is it coming from the employee table or the sales order table? So make sure you use your full column names. As you see here, ord.amount is referring to sales order table amount. EMP first name is referring to the employee's first name. And that's what it will look like. So inner joins, again, they're the default. So you get to see them. You get to see them quite often. Left or right join, again, you might throw out the outer word. That's just fine. But an example of a left join here, you'd see every employee would be shown. The employees that don't have any order placed, they're going to have null values. The employees that have orders placed, you're going to see their orders right next to their name. So you can join the tables. Again, you can have more than 2 joins and so on. So be very careful with the order of the tables in this case. The order of the tables does matter. So if in this case, the left table is the employee table, the right table is the sales table. So all employee records are being included. If we want to do a right join, all we have to do is just flip this over. Now it might become sales order as ORD, right join employee. So it's telling you that include everything from employee and only include the matching sales order from the sales order table. So that's why it's not very popular to use it. Full joins, again, like I said, is just pulling all the records in both tables like a union. It's not very used. It's not very intuitive because it takes up a lot of resources too. But cross join, like I said as well, is explicitly just a Cartesian product. So for instance, this example is a cross join. You're actually looking at the first name and the product name. So it's going to give you, if there are 20 employees and 100 products, you're going to end up with a virtual table of 2,000 records, which is not necessarily what you might need. And since you're using a Cartesian product, you don't need that on clause. The previous one, let me go back one, we had an on clause because you have to show the common columns. But in this case, for cross join, we don't really need common columns, so we just omit that. But they use this again for the full join, for union. Cross join is really used to generate data. So if you want to generate data for testing purposes and so on and so forth, large volumes of data, just take 100 customers and 2,000, 100 customers and 2,000 records or 2,000 products. You end up with 100 or 200,000 flyers that you might go and show out there or send out to your customers. They probably will not be very happy with you. Okay, so self-join again. Think about having a table, an employee table, and in the employee table, you also have managers in there. So you might want to be able to identify your employee and your managers, something like that. But that's about it. There isn't that much else to talk about with joins.